My last name is Gordon. Where do you think this name originated from? It may or may not give you a clue about my family's history. This historical inquiry has helped me to understand how people, events, and forces from the past have shaped my family history. This family story confirms the idea that history contains many stories and that there is never only one uncontested version. With the source of information, my grandfather, no longer able to tell his own stories, although I have been told he very rarely spoke of his life before he came to Australia, this aspect of my family history is told from varying perspectives, which create an interesting analysis. This story explores his position throughout World War II and as a new migrant to Australia as a significant feature of my family's history. I was born in Penrith, New South Wales, Australia in 1991. But how did my family get to Penrith when my grandfather, my dad's dad, was born in Bobrica in the Ukraine in 1926? Bobrica is a small town in the Ukraine, right near the border of Poland. None of my sources could tell me much about Bobrica, which has 7 different pronunciations. However, they each had varying accounts of his movements right before he came to Australia. At 15 or 16, in the middle of World War II, he was separated from his family when Germans captured him and a group of people from his town. He never saw his family again. At this time, Germany was invading the Ukraine and young men were being sent to Austria for slave labor. Once captured, he was sent to a farm in Austria and worked for a farmer. One of my sources tells the following story.
The owner of the farm had 3 sons in the SS Army, and he threatened them that for every son that died in the war, he would shoot one of them. So Michael lived in fear of his life.
I have not been able to work out how long my grandfather lived on the farm. However, the same source says that they lived in the barn on the farm and could constantly hear the war was approaching.
The farm owner said to them that he had poured petrol around the barn, and the minute he saw a tank come, he would light up the barn with them in it.
As the war approached, their fear was heightened. However, one day they awoke to the barn doors opening, and to his surprise, it was the Americans who overnight had taken over the land. They had been rescued. He and his group were sent to a refugee camp. I was not able to find out the location of this camp, however, it was within Austria. I did find out a few interesting things. He was expecting to be sent back to the Ukraine, but the Americans offered resettlement to either South America, Canada, or Australia. Another source states that
He chose Australia because he had never heard of Australia before.
between 1939 and 1942, he left Austria and made the long journey to Sydney, Australia by boat. Upon arriving to Australia, he went to a camp in Marayong. I wish I knew more about what this camp involved and how it assisted him in assimilating. My research suggests that at this time in Australia, more than 170,000 of the 1 million European displaced persons were accepted into Australia as refugees from war-torn Europe. They arrived under the Mass Resettlement Scheme for displaced people. His first job was his involvement in building Warragamba dams, with its continuing construction beginning in 1953. World War II had put a halt to its progress. Here he met his future wife, and this is where my family story in Australia begins. I began by asking you to think about the origin of the last name Gordon. So whilst my father's father is from the Ukraine, he has a surname that originates from Scotland and France. Whilst my grandmother insisted that his birth certificate said Michael Gordon, other family members have a sneaky suspicion that upon arrival to Australia, he changed his name. My grandfather was a part of Australia's growth in immigration after the Second World War, where Australia's population almost doubled from 7.5 million to 13 million. This period of war and migration had a significant impact on the change and continuity of Australian society.